Hey, what is going on, guys? Overzet Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the new strong and weak picks for patch 8.23. Now, before we get started, as being part of the League Partner Program, I was given a bunch of codes for the new Program LeBlanc skin along with the exclusive green chroma. Now, I'm going to be running this giveaway over on my Discord channel. A lot of people in my previous giveaway for the Infernal Amumu skin commented asking if I could have done it on Discord, and they didn't have a Twitter account, so they couldn't enter because I did the last giveaway on Twitter. So I'm going to be running this one on Discord. I feel like a lot of people do have Discord, so it's probably going to be the easiest way for me to run one of these giveaways. I have the channel set up called Program LeBlanc Giveaway on my Discord channel, so all you got to do is head over to my Discord channel. Link will be down in the description below, and just react in that channel and you will be entered into the giveaway. So first up here is a nerf to Aatrox. His ultimate active duration is being lowered by 2 seconds. It's still going to be at 10 seconds though, so I don't see this dropping him down in the tier list. 10 seconds is still a very long time, and if anything, I think that this will only mean now that you have to use your ultimate a bit more carefully, and you can't just be using it to get into a team fight for the extra movement speed. A lot of the time, 10 seconds is going to be way plenty for Aatrox's ultimate. There are going to be some situations like in the early to mid game to where this change would affect him, but I just think that as long as you're using your ultimate a little bit more carefully now in the next patch, then this change shouldn't really affect him too much. So next up here is a buff to Ezreal for next patch. His W's AP ratio is being increased, and then his ultimate is being changed to where it's now going to deal 50% less damage to minions, but it's now going to deal full damage to champions no matter how many minions it passes through or no matter how many champions it passes through. So if you get a 5-man ultimate with Ezreal in a team fight, it's going to do the full damage to all 5 of those champions. So overall, this does make Ezreal's all-in at level 6 a lot stronger, because most of the time when you use your ultimate, you are going to be passing through minions. So with it no longer getting reduced against champions when it passes through units, that's going to be really good for Ezreal at that level 6 spike. It's also going to help him in team fights if you can hit those multi-man ultimates. It is going to hurt his wave clear though, so I think this change is more so going to affect like higher elo Ezreal players, because most Ezreals in higher elo only use their ultimate for wave clear, and they're using it for wave clear a lot more than lower elo Ezreals. So we will have to see how this does pan out for next patch, but I do think overall this should be a buff for Ezreal for 8.23, and he should now be a pretty viable AD carry. So there's a lot of different changes here to Lissandra for 8.23. She's kind of basically getting a mini rework. Her passive is getting reworked to where it's no longer going to be giving you mana back when you use an ability. It's instead going to have this new effect to where when an enemy dies near Lissandra, so you don't have to kill them as Lissandra, they just have to die near you, the enemy is going to become a frozen zombie, and this frozen zombie is going to seek out enemies, slow them for 25%, and then after 4 seconds, they're going to explode and deal damage. So what this means here with the change to Lissandra's passive is that her early game and her wave clear in the early game and her poke in the laning phase is going to be weaker, because she's not going to have as much mana sustain. She's not going to have that free ability every 18 seconds, and this does mean that you're probably going to have to go for a mana item as your first item for next patch. Going for Proto Belt first or Morello and then into Zhonya's may no longer be the most consistent build on her, because you might find yourself just running out of mana too quickly. Rod of Ages as a rush item is actually doing pretty good on Lissandra in this patch right now, so that might be what we see players lean towards for next patch. Maybe something like a Rod of Ages into a Proto Belt and then Zhonya's, or Rod of Ages into Zhonya's. There's definitely going to be some theory crafting, and we will have to see what becomes the best build on Lissandra now. As for the other changes there, she's getting a Q mana cost to kind of compensate for her passive being removed. Her W is also getting a mana cost decrease, and then her W and her ultimate damage, they are being decreased by a little bit there to kind of compensate for her new passive being added. So overall, Lissandra does lose a little bit of solo carry potential for next patch. Her one-shot potential does get weaker because her ultimate and her W damage has been nerfed. She does have a stronger team fight now though, so once you do reach the team fight stage, I do think she does become a little bit of a stronger pick, but it is going to be harder to reach that stage now due to the fact that you do have less damage, you also have less mana sustain in the laning phase, so I think that overall this is going to drop Lissandra out of S tier down into A tier. I just don't think that the introduction of the new passive is enough to make up for all of the other nerfs that she is receiving. So next up here, a really big change to Thalia. So Thalia for jungle is pretty much getting gutted for next patch, at least that's what it looks like. Her Q is now going to deal 50% reduced damage to minions and monsters, so this is really going to hurt Thalia's early clear against like blue buff and against Scuttle. She's not going to be able to clear as effectively, and I do think that with this change here, we're going to be seeing a lot less of Thalia in next patch, and I honestly think, chat, that she's going to drop from like an S tier down to like a B or C tier jungler. Now she is getting some buffs to her Q though. The mana cost is being lowered, the worked ground duration is being reduced by a lot from 120 down to 45 seconds, and the cooldown is being reduced from 11 down to 7 seconds at rank 1. So this is more so a buff here to mid lane Thalia and a nerf to jungle Thalia. For the mid lane Thalia, the change to her Q dealing 50% reduced damage to minions is going to hurt her a little bit in the early game. Her ability to shove back waves for the first few levels is going to be weaker for next patch, but I don't think it affects mid lane Thalia as much as jungle Thalia, just because your main wave clear tool level 3 onward is going to be coming from your W and your E. Your W-E combo is going to be able to one-shot the back wave, and then you can usually finish off the wave with your Q, so I think that overall, the Q being on a lower cooldown, the work ground duration being on a lower cooldown, and the mana cost being lowered should end up being a pretty nice buff there to mid lane Thalia. So Doran's Shield is getting what looks to be a nerf for next patch. The passive on it is getting changed to where you're no longer going to regain 20 health over 10 seconds after taking damage. Instead, you're going to regain up to 30 health over 10 seconds after taking damage based on a percentage of your missing health. Now, because it's changed to where it's a percentage of your missing health, this should mean that for most parts of the laning phase, like in the early laning phase, you will be getting less HP back from Doran's Shield. You should only be getting more HP back if you drop like really low on HP, which at that point, it doesn't really matter too much because you're probably gonna be basing and the regen isn't gonna do a ton for you. So you can expect early game AD carries to get stronger for next patch and weaker laning AD carries that do rely on Doran's Shield in the laning phase to get weaker. And then lastly, to round out the video, Rageblade is getting some pretty big changes for next patch. What they're doing to the item basically is that they're making it so it does scale better into the late game, but it's going to be a weaker first item and a weaker early game item. The major change to the item is to where they're changing the unique passive. It's now going to give you 6 plus 0.5 per level % armor pen and also % magic pen. Now because this is % armor pen and % magic pen, it does mean that in the early stages it's going to be a lot weaker. Unless the enemy team does have a lot of armor and a lot of magic pen, the item is going to be weaker here in the early game. So it's more so going to be a better item later on into the game once the enemies do start stacking resist, but because the bonus AD that you get from the item and the bonus AP per stack is being removed from the item, it's now going to be a lot weaker in the early stages. So I don't think this will indirectly make any champion weaker for next patch. I just think that it's gonna probably change up the build path that a lot of champions go for. For example, Kai'Sa, she usually grabs Rageblade as a second item, and you might see more players go for that later on into the game. So you might see more of a Stormrazor into Runins and then maybe an Infinity Edge, so more of a crit build on Kai'Sa instead of the on-hit build. For champions like Varus and Kog'Maw, they're also very good with the item, but you might see something like Blade the Ruined King into Runins and like Wit's End on those champions, and that's going to be a fine alternative to the Rageblade. There's not a whole lot of other champions in other roles that go for Rageblade right now other than like Master Yi in the jungle, and then I guess Kayle as well does go for Rageblade, and those two champions should get weaker for next patch with these changes because Rageblade is a pretty core item early on into the game on those picks right now, and because it is getting weaker in the early game, I do think those champions should get a bit weaker for 823. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.